Now we're going to get into a little bit more. Talked about laser-assisted photogrammetry. Laser-assisted photogrammetry, real quick, is allows you to recreate a 3D scene from a 2D photograph. Often, in lawsuits, you may get pulled in, 6 months, a year after the accident. The scene has changed. The skid marks aren't there anymore. The debris field is gone, but photographs were taken. Laser-based photogrammetry allows you to re-put down those skid marks, put back all the data, even put the street back in case the street itself has changed, or new buildings put in, or they widen it. Laser-based photogrammetry allows you to take the 2D photograph of the important documents and recreate it 3D. So we're going to show you a case here where that was rather important. This is a police shooting case involved. Happened here, if you look up the top in 1, a Honda going eastbound was observed by unmarked police officers who knew the driver of the car. His name was Johnny Honda, not his given name, but they called him Johnny Honda because he liked to steal Hondas. They saw him in a Honda. They were pretty sure it was stolen, but they had their own issues to deal with. They had a suspect in the back of their vehicle, so they were going to, save going after Johnny for another day. Challenge is Johnny decided to speed and blow through stop signs. They felt at that point in time they could no longer let him do that, and so they followed pursuit. During the pursuit through San Francisco, they blew through several stop signs, blew through a red light, made a turn onto Moore Avenue, went down Moore Avenue, went onto the curb to get around traffic at Bond Street, kept going, and then finally got stuck in traffic near the bottom at 9. Officers jumped out, approached the car, told Johnny to turn the vehicle off. Johnny said no, and backed his vehicle at a high rate of speed into the police officer's vehicle, where the officers opened fired and killed Johnny. Big thing on the news, the big issue is, why'd you kill Johnny simply for stealing a Honda? So obviously in this particular case, the city wanted to figure out and determine if the officer's use of deadly force was warranted. Reconstructed the crime scene of the accident of the officers and decreased driver of the stolen vehicle in real time to visually experience the situation to which the officers were responding. One of the biggest challenges of this case, as you can see here in this photograph, the two vehicles in their resting position, the Honda and the unmarked police vehicle. The problem with this case was the following. The skid mark that was laid down by the Honda was not measured accurately. The location of the two vehicles were not accurately measured. As a matter of fact, almost any measurement taken was incorrect. So we had a situation where we knew nothing. And so the reconstructionist said, look, I cannot reconstruct an accident that I don't have any data of. So as I said, these measurements, when we've analyzed them, were all wrong. They didn't make sense. They were. So in the end result is we have this to work with. We have two photographs of the vehicles in the resting position. We have the two vehicles themselves that are in impound. And if you look at the lower left-hand photograph, you can barely see in front of the police vehicle there is a faint skid mark. So our job was to recreate this entire scene from what you have in front of you, which is normally impossible, but using laser-based photogrammetry, we can take photographs that were taken of the scene to recreate things. So step 1, we laser scan the scene, make a 3D model. Step 2, we texture and light the model. Step 3, we laser scan the vehicle, officer vehicle. We make a 3D model of that vehicle. Next, we laser scan the Honda. What's interesting about this Honda, it was modified. It was lowered. So using the exemplar Honda would have been very difficult. Luckily, as we said, we had the Honda in impound. And if you see those little white dots, those are actually the bullet holes. The laser scan had no problem picking up the bullet holes, which allowed for the ballistic analysis later. Now, we make a 3D model of our Honda. So here is our photograph of the vehicles in a resting position and 2D photograph. But by using laser-based photogrammetry, we can place the two vehicles in 3 dimensions. And as you see, it lines up perfectly with the 2D photograph. This is the method of photogrammetry needs input from a laser scanner, known dimensions, uses the least square algorithm to determine camera position, allows us to create a virtual 3D camera. The result is we can now recreate the 3D scene from a 2D photograph. Finally, what's important is we have a skid mark, as we pointed out earlier. Well, we need to know the length of that skid mark. The length of that skid mark gives us data on how fast this vehicle was traveling backwards and its starting and ending position. Well, through photogrammetry, we now know the length of that skid mark was 8 feet 3 inches. We now know the resting position of these two vehicles. And we know the starting position of the two vehicles because the skid mark tells us where the Honda had to start. So now we took the vehicle, we went out there, and we put it in reverse and floored it, and we tried to see how fast we had to go to get an 8-foot 3-inch skid mark. And once we were able, we can now analyze the speed of the Honda and the rate and impact at impact. And if you see here that near the end at 3.1 seconds, not very long, this car is at almost 20 miles an hour heading towards police officers. Finally, once we now have the car in their right places, we can now ask the officers to go out there and recreate their steps. Beforehand, this was very difficult with them because they could never recreate the location of the Honda and the location of their vehicle. So having them go out there, go through their steps, find out how long it takes to get from their door to the Honda's door, how long it takes for the Honda to back up, how long it takes for them to do anything, would have been based on speculation. But now that we can put these vehicles in the exact positions and distances, asking these officers to recreate what they did is now a lot easier and more accurate. So the end result is an accurate, technically sound visualization of a scene and events when the officers made the decision to fire their weapons. So the end result is here. And we can watch as it shows. He gets stuck in traffic. Officer comes up to Johnny, asks him to turn his car off. Notices Johnny's putting the car in reverse, slams it, sees him going for his fellow partner, and opens fire. Great thing about computer animation is once you have everything, you can show it from multiple views. So it says goes up, sees Johnny is not listening, put it in reverse, sees him heading for his officers, opens fire. What's interesting about this animation was showed to opposing counsel, and opposing counsel actually dropped the case, realizing that their case against the city as excessive force was going to be little effective. And so the city was very happy with the end results of this one.